Okay, take two. Back again after quite a long hiatus. Basically, I just have to work all the time now. New job is like full time, 5 days a week, and it can be pretty draining. So on the few days off that I have, I want to relax and I want to, hang out with my wife or go play cards or something like that. But I have a few hours here in the morning. I went to bed early last night, woke up today pretty refreshed, and so I've got some time and I want to crank this out because it's been on my mind. And I've been wanting to kind of finish up this series and talk about the last couple of Doctors and then maybe do some other kind of cleanup sort of fun things. But so now I'm going to talk about the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. Just a few remarks about him as a doctor. I think he's one of those doctors that, Matt Smith was so over the top, like world famous. Like he brought Doctor Who to a new audience, a world audience, in a way that David Tennant wasn't able to quite. Um, and so a lot of people really mourned his characters leaving the show and Matt moving on to bigger and better things. I don't know if that happened really, but uh, and a lot of people didn't like that it wasn't going to be a young, handsome Doctor anymore. It's like, well, Peter Capaldi is roughly the same age that William Hartnell was when he took on the role, in his 50s. And yeah, he does look older and he is crotchety and he doesn't quite have the same fire that Malcolm from In the Thick of It had, but he definitely brings some of that energy to the character and kind of twists it, makes it his own. So I do think that he is an underrated Doctor, and I think a lot of people are kind of catching on to that. People that had dropped the show after Matt Smith left are kind of picking it back up 5, 10 years later when they've grown and matured and they can see the kind of they can appreciate what Capaldi brought to the role when maybe they were 15 or 16 and they just kind of like, oh well, my doctor's gone, I'm done with this show. And that's just the cycle of life with Doctor Who. There's people who come and leave, and you know that kind of thing. There's always It's always fun to rewatch Doctor Who because you've changed in the interim and you understand the world better and you've had more experiences and you can appreciate performances or stories or just little details that you wouldn't have realized before. I don't know. Waxing too philosophical there. So let's just start off. So there was a little preview of him in the Day of the Doctor, right? That's the 50th anniversary special where he was like, "Oh no, it's all 13." Like, okay, now we know. But now we know that there's 18 trillion iterations of the Doctor, and most of them were small children that were murdered by a fellow Time Lord. Fuck you, Chibnall. But why aren't they out there? Why aren't they out there? Anyway, so Peter Capaldi's Doctor. So he starts out fairly strong with Deep Breath. I think Deep Breath is a very solid. I don't think it's S tier. I think it's a fairly good show. I don't think it's the best intro. So if people are getting into the show, it's definitely not an onboarding episode the way that the 11th Hour or Rose are. It feels more like New Earth. Like you have a companion with a new doctor rather than a doctor with a new companion. Uh, you have the doctor is very much out of sorts. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the best parallel. Is probably the Christmas Invasion and or New Earth, maybe a combination of the two. Where the Christmas Invasion, we have David Tennant coming in and he's out of sorts, and they like the side characters kind of have to figure out where they are in this and what do they feel about the situation. That's kind of what we're seeing right now, or with this episode, except for it's Clara who is still kind of a cipher. We literally don't know what's going on with her. She doesn't really have a very well characterized personality. She's just kind of whatever the story needs her to be at the time, which is very frustrating. But we do get the return of the Paternoster gang. It's Jenny and Strax and Lady Madame Vastra, but anyway, uh, so that's cool. I mean, I've said before, I really like those characters. I I like the concept of the characters. I really wish they would have done more with them. But this is, I think this might be, is this the last time we've seen them now? Anyway, so those characters are back. We get the Doctor. There's some really good stuff. They bring back the clockwork monsters from the Girl in the Fireplace, or at least their robot cousins. Something. They're something similar to like that, where they're killing Victorian peasants and people and stealing their organs to try to become human or whatever. Anyway, and they have a flesh air balloon. So that's really kind of cool and macabre and grotesque, and it's the beginning of this kind of. It's almost like a grimdark era of Doctor Who, where we have more desaturated video and we have some darker themes that we didn't really take seriously before. Especially this, like, yeah, Capaldi season is kind of like the grimdark Doctor Who. Not entirely, but I mean, there's definitely more elements of horror in this his three series than there were for a while. Um, I don't like the giant dino rampaging around Victorian London. I think that's dumb. I think there's other comedy elements that don't really work, but overall, this episode's pretty good. The next, though, Into the Dog, I don't think Into the Dog is very good at all. I don't really know what to say about it. I think it's just boring. It didn't capture my attention. Robot of Sherwood, I hated, and it's kind of, this is like the love hate relationship I have with Mark Gatiss. I mean, I can't even say anything good about this. I want to say like, well, this could have been a good idea. Like, no, it's you're visiting fictional characters. This is like if Doctor Who met Winnie the Pooh for real. Like, it's dumb. Um, Everything about it, the attempts at comedy are very hackish. It doesn't feel like character comedy. It feels very broader, pantomimey. Eh. Listen is not as good as I think people mostly want to put this in like S tier. I think it's kind of an awkward. It introduces, I don't know, maybe it's the first introduction of Danny Pink, this guy that Clara's dating. Um, so, and I think Danny Pink is a really interesting character, but I feel like he's a character that came from a different show. Like they came from a more serious drama show and just sort of uh, somehow made his way into the Doctor Who universe because he's got a depressing backstory. He's he's not a happy-go-lucky character. He's struggling with PTSD, and it's interesting that they try to address that. I think that's the noble goal, but it kind of splits the show where you have this fun freewheeling adventure with Clara and the Doctor in space doing whatever, and then on the other side you have back to reality. And I always kind of wonder, like, why is she still with Danny Pink? Like, she has this other universe. Like, what does she see in him that there's more than just like I like this guy and I respect him. She really actively is trying to get back and have him be part of her life. But like, what role does he fill in her life? I guess that's what they try to address, but it's just it doesn't really work in this type of show. Like it really, I don't know. This series it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Even though I like the actor, I like the character of Danny Pink, I just don't think it works in Doctor Who. It requires a radical change of what the show is. Um, but anyway, the Listen, it's also I don't like about Listen is it's insisting that Clara is the most important character in the Doctor's entire existence. Like, oh, she's the one who told him to be brave when he was scared as a little boy. Like, she already jumped into his timeline and saved him a million times. Like, off screen, don't worry, they're best of friends. Like, you gotta show, don't tell sort of thing. And this is just a different way of. It feels like it's just a different way of telling. It's like, oh, don't you know that? Well, we're just gonna rewrite your entire canon so that you've always been Claire's always been there in your life, and it's just like I don't know, it's annoying. But there, I mean, there's other good elements of the the episode. That I think the core of the episode is very interesting. Um, but these other things kind of distract me from that core show, and that's kind of what this season is like. The eighth season is like there's this core show, but there are these weird otherworld distractions, like being pulled back into the real world and real world troubles with Danny Pink and blah 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 blah, and it detracts from the show. I feel it's not melded the same way that like Rose and her mom were. Like that, I felt like okay, you understand the struggle with the character. I don't really feel this way. Girl Who Died is fine. Um, I guess it's back to Doctor Who addressing gods being aliens. That's okay. That's typical Doctor Who stuff. It's not great. I think the woman who lived is at least more interesting because you get to see the effects of the Doctor and his actions on this character. Um, Time Heist is pretty good. I liked it. I mean, it was timey-wimey, memory erase sort of thing, but yeah, ultimately, yeah, I'll even put that in A. I like that. That's solid. Caretaker, I don't like the Caretaker. It's just it's this episode especially sticks out as a sore thumb because it's trying to be comedic and try to integrate these two worlds. And well, one of those worlds is just not very interesting. She's just a teacher. How did she become a teacher, by the way? We saw her being a live-in nanny for a couple of black kids, and then like the next day, out of nowhere, as like a 21-year-old, she's teaching high school. I don't know what the fuck, what happened. I have no idea what happened. It's never explained. It happened off screen. It's very fucking weird. Okay, next, Kill the Moon. Fuck this episode. This is the weird anti-abortion rant, but it's also just the dumbest concept ever. Nothing makes sense about this episode. Fuck this episode. I will not go into great detail, but in short, the moon is actually an egg. And it's been gestating for someone. And then at the end, the moon cracks open and a baby comes out. And that baby immediately lays another egg that replaces the moon. That's not how any of this works. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Fuck you. Okay. Mummy on the Orient Express. Originally, I didn't like this. I would have put it in C. I'm gonna put this at the top of B. I think it's actually pretty solid. It took me a couple of viewings to really appreciate it, but it's good. Okay, the gem of season 8 though is Flatline. Flatline is brilliant. It's the one episode where I think I really like and sort of identify with Clara. She's smart and clever and inquisitive and charming, and she's kind of on her own. She has the Doctor in her pocket essentially, but she's, well, for all intents and purposes, she's the Doctor character, and the Doctor is the assistant in this episode. The special effects for the flat monsters are. The first time I watched this, I thought it was dumb. I thought the premise was dumb. It was like 2D eating 3D, but the more I thought about it, it's like that's actually a really interesting idea, and I think the effects are really fantastic. Like, nothing has been done like this before or since. It just looks completely unique in the oeuvre of Doctor Who. It doesn't look like CG. If anything, it looks like claymation or something. It very off-putting. All of the stuff with the Doctor being kind of trapped in the TARDIS and the TARDIS losing its dimensionality is so clever and inventive and everything. And even the character Digby who comes back, he's a good character. It's just a incredible show. Like, this is the one that I would watch. This is the one. This is the I think this is the 12th Doctor's blink. Is that it really is a story by itself. It's kind of Doctor Light. Like, the Doctor's there and he's talking with Clara, but for the most part it's Clara doing her own thing. And it's just endlessly inventive. It's fun to watch. It's also it's effectively like scary. Like, you think it's kind of silly, but like, yeah, no, it's got some good scares in there too. I don't know. I absolutely adore this episode. I think it's the best of the season. Yeah, I think it's the best of the season. All right, Force of the Night gets a lot of flack, but I think it's fine. The overall message is kind of interesting. It You get to see Danny Pink kind of in his element, so it's like the only episode where you see him kind of more like personal development, which makes it interesting. Next, Dark Water. I think Dark Water is really brilliant. It's like top of A. I don't think it's quite S tier, but the idea that like human consciousness and sentience continues after death, and that your body can feel pain and all this other, like, that is rightfully so the impetus behind a letter writing campaign to the BBC, because that must have given kids fucking nightmares for years. It's still one of the creepiest ideas. The idea of kind of heaven or the afterlife as being like a waiting room for souls. I think all of this stuff like meshes. I think all of it works really well. But like most things with that Moffat puts his hand to, he does not stick the landing. So Death in Heaven is like bottom of the sea. I really don't like the way that it's like get this really creepy, cool, unique setup, and then it just becomes a generic Cyberman invasion story. They I hate what they did with Danny. I was like, this is not what you do with the character Danny Pink. He got killed. That's the reason they did all this stuff. It was kind of the catalyst to the first episode, which is it's like a reverse like Woman in the Freezer. I think that's what they call it. Like the trope where, oh, women have to die to give male characters like motivation, and you see this in like all kinds of media, and it is a weird sexist trope. But this is kind of like just the reverse. It's like Danny Pink just gets flattened by a fucking delivery truck, and suddenly Clara has to change all time and space to bring him back to life. It doesn't, but I mean, it doesn't happen. He becomes a Cyberman. Everything becomes a Cyberman. It's Cyberman world domination story. It has unit, and they force the Doctor to become the president of the world. They trot out the Brigadier over and over and over again. It's like, look, I love the Brigadier as a character, but like Nicholas Courtney died, and they just keep mentioning him, and it's Kate Stewart. It's like, don't you know who my dad was? Like, my dad was like, she's all her character is oh, my dad was a character that you liked 50 years ago. So she has no charisma. She has nothing. Fuck it. I fucked this episode. The Doctor like saluting the Nicholas or the Brigadier's who is now a Cyberman. It's just like, I don't think you can get more disrespectful to any of these characters. It's just such a slap in the face. Um, you know what? I'm gonna put it in D. Put top of D. Because I detest it. Let's see. Last Christmas. Last Christmas is good. I'm here to tell you the Christmas episodes in Doctor Who are light entertainment. Like, they are not a core part of Doctor Who identity as a show. They allow the show to do things that are funny and farcical and not so serious, that don't affect canon. Actually, I should go back a little bit. So at the end of Death in Heaven, Clara and the Doctor part ways. And I'm like, okay, that's a good way for the look, she went through this traumatic thing with her boyfriend dying, and she can't be with the Doctor anymore because being with him means constantly seeing death, and she's got to deal with her own trauma, and they can't hang out anymore. And it makes perfect sense for the characters to go their separate ways amicably. But of course, she's immediately back again in Last Christmas. And no, they I don't know. They try to milk the Danny Pink thing. I don't like that. But the rest of it, where it is kind of a mind fuck, and it has Nick Frost playing the Santa Claus or Father Christmas, whatever. That's fun. There's weird mind altering alien stuff, and I dig all of that stuff. It's all very good. It's all very cool. It bucks the trend of Christmas stories being kind of crap. Like they are light entertainment, which means they don't really trigger, or like they don't, what's the word? They just don't hit the same way as any other Doctor Who episode. And so a lot of Doctor Who fans don't like the Christmas episode. I like the idea of there being a Christmas episode. Or something like a holiday special. And I think moving towards a New Year's special, I think is probably a better thing because then you don't have to be constantly rehashing the same Christmas sort of themes. But that's an aside. Last one, Oscar is good. Season 9 is real. I guess you might say it's consistent. So you can see this. I went through the first, and there's like, it runs the gamut. Like there's a lot of trash. There's, I think, one or two really good episodes. Anything in A2, these are all really good. But like it's all over the place as far as quality goes. This is my opinion, obviously. Whereas the next season is all real mid. Some of it's really pretty good. There's very little of it that's great. There's a couple. But there's also very little of it that's very bad. It's just very mediocre. So, well, I mean, we'll get through that. Okay. Magician's Apprentice. I hate the sonic sunglasses. I don't like the Doctor playing guitar and stuff like that. Missy is back again. Like she was already there at the end of last season, and they're kind of risking overusing Missy. But as a two-parter, I think it's fine. This season is like almost all two-parters. So Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, is fine. It's watchable. I don't think it's great. Under the Lake, I really like the setup, but I didn't like the payoff quite as much. But they're both very fine. Like very middle of the road. I don't think there's a lot to say about this. I don't know if I'd say it's controversy, but there was an interesting thing about like casting a deaf actress in Under the Lake. But it wasn't a way that drew attention to itself. Like that's just who the character was, and it wasn't like they used it as a minor plot point, and they used it as a way to develop the character, like characterize the character, and they kind of highlighted the idea that her being differently abled gave her different capabilities from the rest of the crew and kind of differentiated her, which I think that was all really cool. If you're going to do that, if you're going to have marginalized and differently abled or disabled characters in your show, this is the way to do it. I think it's done very well. It doesn't draw a whole lot of attention to itself. It's just like, this is just a character, and this is just who this character is. You just deal with it. And it doesn't throw anything in your face. It doesn't try to be preachy or anything like that. It's just like, oh, well, in real life, you're going to run into people that are deaf or blind or disabled in some other way, and that's fine. They're able to do 90% of everything else, and sometimes they're going to have some ability that sets them apart from other people. Anyway, all right. Zygon Invasion, Zygon Inversion. I think this is kind of the reverse. So I think Zygon Invasion is like, it's fine. They tie up this thread that they kind of had left over from Day of the Doctor. They revisit it and like, okay, well, it's been a few years. How are things getting on? I think that the episodes themselves are fine. They don't live up to the speech. Like, that's what you watch this for, is at the end of Zygon Inversion, the Doctor gives what I think is probably the best Doctor speech. And he just says stuff that's like, it's relevant to this episode, but it's just relative in general. It's like, it's a one line like, look, you can kill each other all day, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to sit down and talk about it. Like that's why war is so fucking stupid, because you're just killing each other, and eventually you have to do what they had to do in the first place, which is diplomacy. Like it's always going to end with diplomacy, or it's gonna end in mutual destruction. Like those are your choices. Um, I think it's particularly relevant today, but I think it's kind of it's always relevant. And his fire and his sarcasm and just everything, the way that he does, that gives the speech. Like I'm not. I think Doctor Who's speeches are kind of overplayed. I'd rather him not be that kind of character. But this one comes natural, and it's like it's showing a darker side of the character where he kind of manipulated the situation so they would be in there and they would have to do exactly what he's telling them to do, because he's treating them like children. Like there's, you don't want the Doctor to be this I don't know, figure of moral perfection. I don't like that. I like that he's morally imperfect and sometimes ambiguous. But this is something he knows about. He knows about war. He knows about what he had to do with his own people. And he's seen this destruction time after time everywhere. And he's like, I thought we got past this, humanity. Clearly we haven't. If you're gonna act like children, I'm gonna treat you like children. And it works. It just works. The rest of the episode it's fine. But that part, that speech at the end, elevates it rather than kind of drag. Like a lot of times, Doctor speeches just kind of drag on. But this is the one that bucks the trend. Okay, Sleep No More is just not watchable. It's just so dumb, and it has nothing to. It's like it's an isolated episode. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything else. It breaks the symmetry of the season where it was two-parters up until now, and it's two-parters after. This particular one is not, and it's crap. Face the Raven is actually fine. Face the Raven is a pretty good episode on itself. I think Clara dying because she's just kind of dumb and didn't think things through. Sure. Like we don't really know what this is the end of the character. We still really don't know anything about her. We can't characterize her. Is she smart and clever, or is she brash and like reckless? Like what is she? She's whatever the story needs her to be. In this particular instance, they need her to go away, so she needs to be brash and reckless so that she will die. They bring back Digby. They bring back me instead. No. There's some. They bring back other characters. I like the idea of that there's this area in London that kind of has a perception filter on it, and it's like where refugees live. I wish they would revisit that, because that's just a fucking really cool idea. And that it's been there for a while, so it looks like an old, again, like Victorian or Elizabethan even street, and it's kind of hidden from the rest of the world. And I love that idea so fucking much, and I wish they would do more with that. They got to revisit that anyway. But Clara dies, and she's gone. Thank fuck. Of course, the show has to tell us that Clara is so important to the Doctor that he can't get over it. He cannot get over her death. He should have prevented it. He should have blah, 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 blah. Well, no. Be that as may, I don't buy that the Doctor is that broken up more so than he ever was with Rose or with Amy and Rory or with Donna. Like more than other things, that Clara has had such a profound effect on him as a person that he cannot get over her death. I don't buy it. Putting that aside, Heaven Sent is definitely S tier. It's time loop fiction, and I definitely have a thing for time loop fiction. It's a very clever episode. It works on many levels. It works on a literal level where he's trapped by the Time Lords, and he has to go through this thing over and over and over again. It also works on kind of metafictional, well, metafictional, no, I guess allegorical level. It works where this just getting up and doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that eventually you'll get better. Just having that sort of, I hate this word, but having this faith that things are going to get better. And this episode is about grief. It's about depression. Um, it's about just doing the same thing over and over again and getting through the day, even though, like, after a loss, after this sort of, because he has to break through. He has to break this wall of diamond with his bare fist, and it takes him a billion years and whatever. And just knowing that eventually things will get better is the light at the end of the tunnel for people who are suffering grief or depression. I think it's works brilliantly on every level that it works. Clearly one of the best episodes of this era. And Hellbent is the bottom. F minus minus. Fuck you. Fuck everyone involved in the show. I hate everything about it. So the idea is that, again, so there's been this, I guess you kind of call it an arc about the Time Lords, like, oh, if they're going to return or not. You had end of time, anyway, with Rassilon and the Doctor shooting him in the face. And then you had Day of the Doctor, where the Doctor had to save, Gallifrey and put it in a pocket dimension or whatever happened. And it was always leading to this, like, oh, well, Gallifrey is now back, I guess, and Gallifrey has lured. Oh yeah, sorry. Also the crack in the wall, which is somehow also Time Lords, even though it was the TARDIS blowing up, but the Time Lords on the other side of it, and they give the 11th Doctor a new set of regenerations. That whole trash. But we're back here, and Hellbent is it's an insult to everything. It just doesn't give anyone what anyone wanted from a return to Gallifrey. It's like, oh, he's back on Gallifrey. This is the first episode on Gallifrey since what like, I guess you would say since, well, no, that was on a space station. I was gonna say Trial of Time Lord, but no, that was on like a space station. So first time they've been to Gallifrey since, is it Five Doctors? Is it Five Doctors or like I think so. Anyway. So they go back there, and like, you don't see the Citadel really. You don't really see Time Lord civilization. You just see a shack in a desert and a bunch of weird poor people that, again, they look like they came out of a Broadway production of Oliver, and they're all there and they worshiping the Doctor as a hero, and I don't know what the hell is going on. And then I guess that's Rassilon that shows up, but it doesn't look like Rassilon, and the Doctor tells him to go away because he's a mean guy, or he uses his powers as president to try to bring Clara back, like, even though he knows this kind of thing doesn't work. It just, and then, so they can't leave her dead. They can't have his growth in the previous episode mean anything. He has to immediately go back and change things, and none of it makes sense. And then suddenly it's Clara and me are running off together. Why? I don't know. I didn't understand anything happened in this episode. Like, is she dead? Is she not dead? Is it trapped? She's off in a split second of time between when she was about to get hit by Raven and the Doctor snatched her of time, but she eventually has to die. And okay, but they haven't done any spin-off media, and if they did, I don't think would watch it, because I guess there's people like her character, but I fucking hate it. Anyway, the Husbands of River Song. I don't know. It's watchable. Again, it's Doctor Who is light entertainment. It kind of wraps up the River Song storyline. Kind of gives you some sort of what's the word, closure, like kind of wrapping up her story. but it's silly. It's got Greg Davies, and I like him, and it's got Nardole. I love him. We'll see him more next period, but or next season. But yeah, the episode's bottom of C. It's watchable, but um, the return of Doctor Mysterio is just bad. I don't even know what to say about it. It's bad. Okay, pilot starting off fairly strong. I'm gonna put it top of B. So this next one, they call it the pilot, and it's really supposed to be a soft reboot of the show. And this is where they're like, okay, well, I think we've lost some of the audience, and we need to have a new onboarding episode. So they've introduced uh, a new companion for the 12th Doctor, and it's Bill. I don't know why there's this obsession with giving women men's names, but whatever. Bill's a great character. Uh, she's like a sci-fi nerd, so it's kind of there's a bit of a weird meta aspect where she talks about I think she mentions like Star Trek or something like that, and like yeah, there's cool things, and she's a really cool character, and the actress is great. I forget her name completely, but she's fantastic. Um, and she's gay, and so she falls in love with a puddle of water. Uh, that's essentially what the plot is. Um, the pilot is like it's like sentient fuel or something like that. It's like it's real weird. But as it again, like the enemy doesn't matter so much. It's more about onboarding new audience and introducing a new companion, and it works on that level, and it's entertaining. Maybe in the middle of B. Smile I think is better. Smile is probably bottom of A. Maybe better than Time Heist. Yeah, that's probably about right. Let's put it like that. Under, yeah, okay. Um, I think Smile is really good. I like the idea of it. They have a different, like a very happy dystopia. Like, that feels more New World Order than 1984. You get that dichotomy. It's I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I guess it's just I think it's real solid. I think these first three, the pilot, Smile, and the next one, Thin Ice. Thin Ice is maybe not quite as good. I think it's probably bottom B, top of B. But again, they went back to this time period and they didn't have Paternoster Gang. I don't know, missed opportunity. But Thin Ice is also really strong. It's this kind of trilogy. I don't know if it's really a trilogy, but like this run of three episodes is a very strong introduction to the character. It does a really good job of showing that these characters, that the Doctor and Bill work really well together, that they have a very good working relationship, a really strong rapport, uh, and it highlights and it shows Bill kind of adjusting to this life and how her personally is dealing with how things are how things are moving with the Doctor and how she feels about this sort of thing. And I think that's a really important thing to happen. You really need to have that to develop a companion character, at least in the modern. You can't just have these girls screaming and asking questions like you had in the old days. Knock Knock is just really dumb. I don't like it at all. I know it's got what's his name, the guy who is really famous for playing Hercule Poirot. I forget his name, Jason or something. I don't know. Anyway, so they've got him, and that it's just like the episode is stunt casting, really weird and dumb plot, and then hoping that like okay, Bill is now living with a bunch of strangers, and they're all just most of them are just gonna get killed. Like it's and they never come back again. Like they don't mean anything. They're just there to get killed. It's so you don't. I don't know. It's like a base under siege episode, except for it's in a haunted mansion. It's not good. Um, Oxygen is really solid. I'd put that in A. I like the anti-capitalist message. At the like the system just kind of takes over people's bodies. Like I think that's fantastically creepy, and it really is embodies kind of late stage capitalism. Um, the idea that even even far in the future, we're gonna have this kind of corporate feudal state that we have is a bit depressing, but it's also suggested that we eventually overcome that. So I guess there's a hopeful message. But then we have this like new, starting with Oxygen, we get more Nardole. Nardole is going with, because before he was sort of like, he's the guy that hangs out in the office. He's the guy in the chair for the doctor, basically. Um, but he's out there. He's doing adventures with the doctor, and it's pretty great. Matt Lucas is awesome. Nardole is basically Matt Lucas barely playing a character. Like he clearly didn't have to do any makeup. That's just him, and he's awesome. And there's a really it becomes this fantastic dynamic. Like I've said before, I think two is the perfect number of companions, and it's best if those two characters have tension rather than being BFFs. Like we don't want them to work as a union or a unit. We want them to have kind of butt heads a little bit and have be unequal in a lot of different ways. Uh, and Nardole is just like the perfect weird, eccentric character that's not human, that is so different from Bill and is approaching things from the complete opposite end. Um, but then obviously they respect each other and work together really well. It's like this is like the best. Not necessarily just Nardole, but like this kind of dynamic is the best that you will ever get in Doctor Who, in my opinion. And you don't get a lot of it in the show. I think they don't really have non-human companions in the show. Like at least not in the new show. It's all people from Earth and modern day Earth and boring. Okay, moving right along. The next one is the what is the Mummy trilogy or something like that. I'm just gonna put them all right in B. Yeah, we're gonna push some stuff down there, but that's okay. So they're all like this story is good and fine and interesting, but it's also I don't know. I feel like this is kind of like the core of the season, and it's just like it's solid, but there's very little that's great. I think there are a lot of really cool ideas, um, but it's I don't know. It's in service of like this three-part story, so it's like they don't get a chance to really develop a lot of these ideas the way they should. I don't know. At the end of Oxygen, it's revealed, like the big reveal, the big teaser, the stinger or whatever for the next episode. It's like, oh, but I'm blind. Like, oh, the doctor's blind. I guess that's a way to have stakes without it being like the world ending, but it just felt really weird and gimmicky. I don't know. The doctor being blind thing was a really weird. I don't know what they were trying to do with that. Because obviously he got better. But I don't know. So I don't really have anything to say about the trilogy. I think it kind of wraps up in an interesting way. They try to have like these three feel like they could have been a whole season, right? Like this whole what we had with Martha Jones, where she was the only sane one, and she was the one who was crusading against the master, and they had a two-parter, and it was like epic and blah 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 blah. That's kind of we got that in a single episode of this arc. So we got that with Bill. Bill was basically the new Martha Jones and had to sacrifice herself and go through all these hoops to save the world. And I mean, gotta love Bill. I don't know. Anyway, okay, Princess of Mars. I want to say this is Mark Gatiss again. I'm not 100% sure. It's so goofy. It's it's like I kind of love it. I kind of love its goofiness. Like it refuses to take itself seriously. But unlike Robot of Sherwood, it sets itself on Mars. So it's like, okay, there's a reason why it's different and weird. Like there's some sort of explanation for this stuff. Ultimately, it's like a throwaway episode. That's all that Gatiss ever writes is kind of throwaway episodes. But you know, I have a soft spot for this one. I don't know why. I have a similar soft spot for Eaters of Light, although I think that's probably C, uh, like down here or something like that. I like that they brought back the. It's like the only writer that's written for the old show and the new show. Is it the Rona Monroe? Is that right? She wrote like the survival, like the last episode of the original series, and it's this episode. It has a really interesting. I say this a lot, like interesting ideas, but not developed very well. But that's kind of par for the course with Doctor Who. I think that's in a weird way that's kind of the charm of Doctor Who, and why I think that's. Here's my pet theory is that the fact that it has great ideas that aren't developed well is why it has inspired so many people to become writers. Because they're like, oh, what are you doing? I can do this better. And so they spend their lives trying to do it better than Doctor Who could. And sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they just end up reading or writing for Doctor Who. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I like the ideas. So World Enough in Time is A tier or S tier. This is one of those where it's just so perfect with Missy giving her some sort of redemption arc. Um, the body horror of the Cybermen, the timey-wiminess of the Mondasian escape ship. Um, just everything plays so beautifully in this first episode. I think this is the one landing that the Moffat has almost stuck. I don't think Doctor Falls is perfect. I like that it's a multi-master story. I think that's a really cool idea. Sure, I guess you have to bring back John Sim, but I've expressed my distaste for John Sim Master. And it's like he's just dialed to 11. He's just so, I want to say over the top, but he's over the top. Like he's so crazy and loony, and we've had such character growth with Missy, and the actress is so brilliant that, and she has such a nuanced performance, and it's like playing against someone who has no nuance, who has never heard of the word nuance, and he also doesn't really do much like in the episode. He just sort of cackles and gleefully enjoys his own evilness, and it's comic book villain stuff. Not even comic book villain stuff. Comic books haven't been that lacking in nuance for 50 years either. Uh, Other than that, the rest of the actual story with Bill becoming a cyber lady, I guess. Anyway, but it's Mondasian Cybermen. They're fucking creepy as hell. Thank you for bringing back Mondasian Cybermen. Oh my god. Uh, the Master having disguise in the previous episode is actually kind of brilliant, but I think everyone knew what was going on. It was like the makeup was so thick and silly. But again, that's part of the Master's shtick too. It's not the first time he's had really obvious disguise. Um, yeah, I like the Doctor Falls, but I think there's enough that detracts from it, and it doesn't. I'd say it's like 75% sticks to landing, but the setup is so strong. It, it I don't know. It's shot really well. It's directed really well. Both are. I just don't think it's quite S tier. But World Enough in Time, I think, is definitely S tier. But it's one of those things where, you know, if you have a two-parter and they're both not equally brilliant, it kind of detracts from the whole. And then the last thing we have is Twice Upon a Time, which is yeah, that's about it. It's again, like, just leave characters dead, man. Like, you had you almost had a really good goodbye for Bill. Like this could have been the Adric of New Who. Like she was a liked character. Well, Adric wasn't really liked, but I like Adric, but that's a whole other thing. But she was a really well developed character, and you gave her a meaningful death. And then you took it back by having the sentient fuel come and rescue her so they can be space girlfriends forever. Why? This is what? Why? 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 So that's what happened at the end of the Doctor Falls. That's one of the things I hate the most about it. Because it's just like meaningful character deaths. Don't kill off characters willy nilly, but when they do die, when a main character dies, have it stick and have it mean something. This is 2 times in a row, in 2 seasons in a row, that the main companion dies in the final two-parter, only to be resurrected in the last 10 minutes of the second part. And it feels like, you know, reading Grimm's fairy tales, and then the kid gets disturbed, and you're like, oh, but they live happily ever after in the fairy kingdom. It's just stupid. Okay, but Twice Upon a Time brings back Bill. Why? I know it's not really her. It's some sort of computer simulation of her. It's the Arnold Rimmer of Bill's. But why? Just don't have a companion. You can just not have a companion. It's fine. You have a second Doctor, and I think he's good. But he's also playing. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into it because I just think the writing is not that great, and it just didn't mean a whole lot. It just felt like a bad way for the character to live. The Doctor should have just died at the end of the Doctor Falls. It's called the Doctor Falls. Like the Doctor, like they telegraphed it. They should have just. I think Moffat was too interested in being clever and subverting the expectations, as if that somehow makes writing good and meaningful and emotive. But it's not. The Doctor falls. The Doctor should have fallen in the Doctor Falls and then regenerated into the next iteration. But that's about it. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of solid stuff here. There's, I think there's a few. A lot of people are probably going to put a lot of these things into S tier. I guess I'm a little more critical. These are the ones that I think are just like so fantastic that no one can argue with. Flatline, if anything, Flatline is going to get a controversial one. I think on reassessment, people like that, but people, it's just one that kind of slipped past because it isn't. People think that the best episodes are going to be the big epic ones, and that just isn't always the case. The ones that are good are just the ones that are good. I mean, Doctor Who is, in a lot of ways, like Star Trek. It's like it has the same characters every week, but in a lot of ways, it's like an anthology show. It has a weird premise every single week, and they're gonna hit different people differently. And sometimes the best episode is just the one off in the middle of a season. It's not the best of both worlds. Season 3 to season 4, of Next Generation. Like people are gonna always say, "Oh, that's one of the best episodes." Sure, some of the best episodes of New Who are the 2-part, season ender epic stuff. Some of those are the very best ones, and sometimes it's just a random one in the middle of the season. And for me, I think Flatline is the best of the computer quality era. And I'm hating myself for saying this, but largely because he's kind of absent in that one. It allows the companion to do a thing. All right, I've rambled entirely too long. I've got other shit to do, but thanks for coming along with me.